They were burning the American flag in the middle of a sold-out stadium, not tearing it, not folding it into a box at a funeral, burning it. Flames crawling up the fabric while 60,000 people watched, while cameras rolled, while a man stood on stage holding a guitar and made a decision that would shake Hollywood, rattle the media, and turn one night into something nobody, not the activists, not the press, not the people who orchestrated this, saw coming. This was not a peaceful protest. This was a calculated provocation by a group of far-left radicals who had infiltrated the venue with one purpose: to start a fire, literally and figuratively, in front of the largest audience possible. They came prepared: torches, matching gear, a formation designed to draw every camera in the building. They were loud, they were aggressive, they chanted in unison, voices overlapping, rehearsed, the kind of coordinated noise that is designed not to persuade but to destabilize. They wanted chaos, they wanted confrontation, they wanted Toby Keith to react, to explode, to lose control, to give the media exactly the clip they needed to destroy him. They had no idea what they were actually handing him. Toby Keith had spent his entire career being called dangerous by people who had never once listened to one of his songs without looking for something to be offended by. The media had painted him as a symbol of blind nationalism. Hollywood had written him off as a relic. Opinion pieces called his fans uninformed. Late-night hosts used his name as a punchline. And now, standing center stage with 60,000 people watching a burning flag behind him, every single one of those critics was waiting, practically praying for him to prove them right. He did the opposite. He stopped playing. The band went silent. The stadium went silent. 60,000 people, 60,000 held breaths. And in that silence, in that razor-thin space between provocation and response, Toby Keith made a choice that nobody expected. He didn't yell, he didn't curse, he didn't point and threaten. He turned to his sound technician and said something nobody in the crowd could hear, but they saw what happened next. The technician walked off the stage straight toward the group carrying a microphone, a good one, the kind that picks up everything, every word, every breath, every stumble. He walked past the front rows, past the barrier, and stopped directly in front of the leader of the group, the man holding the burning flag, the man at the center of the formation, the loudest voice in the crowd, and held it out, offered it, like a gift. And Toby Keith leaned into his own mic and said, "Tell us what fascism is. Not get out. Not shut up. Not a threat disguised as a question. Just that. Simple, calm, almost friendly. The kind of line that sounds casual, until you realize what it actually does. It puts the entire weight of 60,000 people's attention on one man, one microphone, and one question he now has no choice but to answer. There is no escape from that moment. There is no walk back. There is no turning to the crowd and saying, "This is ridiculous," because the microphone is already in your hand and 60,000 eyes are already on you. The leader took the mic and fell apart. What came out of his mouth was not a definition. It was not an argument. It was fragments, broken, talking points, buzzwords he had memorized from social media posts but never actually understood. He stumbled over his own sentences. He repeated himself. He started a thought, lost it, circled back to it, lost it again. He said, basically, so many times it became a joke before anyone laughed. His voice cracked. The microphone caught every single second of it, every hesitation, every dead end, every moment where the words just stopped coming, and the silence filled in behind them like water flooding a sinking ship. 60,000 people heard it, all of it, every word, every non-word, every gap where an idea should have been and wasn't. And for a few seconds nobody reacted. The man was still talking, still trying, still grasping at something that wasn't there. An argument he could not construct, a concept he could not define, the thing he had come to this stadium to fight for, and he could not explain what it was. Then someone laughed, not a cruel laugh, not a mocking laugh, the kind that escapes when the absurdity of what you're watching hits you faster than your brain can process it, and once it started, it spread. Section by section, row by row, 60,000 people laughing, not at a man but at the moment, at the absurd, impossible gap between what these activists had come here to do and what was actually happening in front of them. But it wasn't over. Another member of the group stepped forward, a woman, taller, more composed. She took the mic from his hand with a look that said she was embarrassed for him, and she launched into her own explanation. Her voice was steady. Her delivery was rehearsed. For the first few seconds, it almost sounded credible, so like she might actually salvage the moment for her side, like she might prove that what happened to the first guy was a fluke, not a pattern. And then it became clear that what she was describing was not fascism. She was describing nationalism. Then she was describing patriotism. Then she was describing pride. Her definition kept expanding, kept swallowing new territory until it had consumed everything. Until singing the national anthem at a baseball game was fascism. Until putting a flag outside your house was fascism. Until teaching your kids to be proud of where they live was fascism. She had just defined fascism as being American. The laughter came back harder, louder, from everywhere. Not polite laughter, not nervous laughter. The kind that comes from a crowd that has just collectively realized something. That the people who showed up tonight to warn them about the dangers of extremism had just demonstrated, on a live microphone in front of 60,000 people, that they did not understand the word they were using. And here is where it gets interesting. Because Toby Keith, the man Hollywood had spent years trying to tear down, the man the media called a symbol of everything wrong with this country, did not take a victory lap. He did not mock them. He did not turn to the cameras and say, "See what we're dealing with." He did not give the press a single usable quote about how stupid these people were. He smiled, a small one, genuine. And then he turned his back on the activists entirely. He faced the crowd, all 60,000 of them, and he raised his microphone, not as a weapon, not as a prop, just slightly, the way a man raises his hand when he wants a room to listen. And he started to sing, not one of his songs, the national anthem. Quiet at first, just a few notes, testing the water, and the crowd followed him like they had been waiting for permission to do exactly this. A few voices in the front rows, then more in the middle, then entire sections erupting, not politely, not the way people half sing at a sporting event when they remember the words. This was something else entirely. This was 60,000 people pouring everything they had felt in the last 5 minutes. The tension, the anger, the disbelief, the frustration, the pride, into one song. Full throats, eyes wet, voices trembling, hands over hearts. The kind of collective moment that does not get manufactured. It either happens or it doesn't. And it happened. The activists were still standing there when it hit them. The torches had gone out. The burned flag hung from one hand like a dead thing. And they stood there, all of them, surrounded by the sound of 60,000 Americans singing the anthem they had come here to reject. They could not drown it out. They could not stop it. They could not reframe it or spin it or turn it into something it wasn't. It was too loud. It was too real. It was too many people feeling too much at the same time for anyone to control. One of them, a young man near the back of the group, lowered his sign, quietly. No drama, no grand gesture. He just put it down and stood there, listening to the anthem wash over him like something he had not felt in a long time and did not have a word for. The song ended. The stadium exploded. Not applause. Something bigger than applause, relief, pride. Fury transformed into something bright. The sound of 60,000 people exhaling at the same time after holding their breath for 5 minutes straight. Toby Keith picked up his guitar and played the next song on the set list, like nothing had happened. The activists left before the show ended. No statement, no press conference. They walked out and disappeared, and the crowd let them go without a word, without a single confrontation. That was the part that mattered most, not the laughter, not the singing. The fact that 60,000 people had been given every reason to be angry and chose all at once to be something else. The next morning, the headlines hit, and they were not what anyone on the other side of this had wanted. The story did not center on the burning flag. It did not center on the activists' message or their cause. It centered on Toby Keith, on what he had done, on how he had responded. And the media, the same media that had spent years painting him as a threat, was forced to cover a moment they had no framework for. A moment where the man they had warned everyone about had won without raising his voice, without throwing a punch, without saying a single thing that could be clipped and turned into evidence against him. Some of them tried anyway. They called his response condescending. They wrote opinion pieces arguing that his calm was itself a form of violence, that by turning these activists into a punchline, he had silenced them without actually engaging with their concerns. These pieces were published. They were shared in the spaces where they were expected to be shared, and then they disappeared. Because the video existed, everyone had seen it, and no amount of reframing could change what had actually happened. A man had been asked a simple question and could not answer it. Another person had tried and made it worse, and 60,000 Americans had responded with the national anthem. The activists went quiet. A few posts on social media, defensive, thin, claiming the moment had been taken out of context. Nobody engaged. The story had moved past them before they understood what had happened to it. One interview came out weeks later that said more than all the headlines combined. A local station sat down with one of the younger members of the group, a college student. He was uncomfortable the entire time, shifting, looking at his hands, struggling to find words that didn't sound hollow. When the reporter asked what he had hoped to accomplish that night, he paused for a long time, long enough that the silence became its own answer. Then he said, "I think we thought we were going to make him angry. That was the plan. And when he didn't get angry, I didn't have a plan for that. That was it. That was the whole thing, stripped down to the bone. They had come to provoke a reaction. The reaction never came. And without that reaction, the entire structure of what they had built that night, the torches, the flag, the formation, the message, collapsed into nothing. Not because Toby Keith dismantled their argument, because he refused to play the game at all. In the months that followed, people studied this night the way they study great performances. Not for what was said, but for what wasn't. Communicators analyzed it. Journalists wrote about it as a case study in how one person can walk into a storm and come out the other side without a scar. The moment became a reference point, a proof of concept for something most public figures never learn, that the most devastating response to provocation is not anger, not cleverness, not even dignity. It is refusal, the clean, quiet refusal to give the other side what they came for. Toby Keith gave one interview about it, weeks after. When the reporter asked how he had decided to respond the way he did, he didn't pause or perform. He just said, "I didn't want to give them what they came for, and I didn't want to give the crowd something to be ashamed of." That was it. Not a philosophy, not a political statement. Just a man who understood, after decades of standing in front of crowds, what people actually need from the person on the stage. They don't need anger, they don't need righteousness, they don't need someone to fight on their behalf. They need permission. Permission to feel what they're feeling without turning it into something ugly. Permission to be proud without being violent, permission to sing. And that is what the night became. Not about the activists, not about the flag, not about Hollywood or the media or the culture war that had been raging for years before that evening. It became about 60,000 people finding their voices at the exact same moment, singing the same words, feeling the same thing, and realizing all at once that nothing those radicals had done could take that from them. Fire can destroy a flag. It cannot destroy what people carry in their chest when they hear those words and feel something they cannot explain and do not need to explain. That is the story. That is why years later people still bring it up, not as a political win, not as a viral moment, as a reminder of what happens when one man refuses to give fear exactly what it wants. 60,000 voices, one song, 0 warnings. That was the night.